me about why APIs are so important and how firms should be thinking about APIs. What should they really be, focused on when it comes to API integrations and their core systems in particular?
Probably a couple of things. First is the accessibility of application programming interface, as you know, is really just the way that computers can talk to each other. In the past, the only way they talked to each other was maybe you download a CSV from a process, and then you upload it into another system. That was the manual API, I guess you could say. Today, it's publishing. A software firm might publish their API so that you as a client can come in and pull your information or upload your information or turn that information into a data warehouse where you can store it and move it to another platform. But what it also really allows you to do is, as Rick was talking about with workflow, it allows you to build your own workflow. So interfacing with the general ledger so that you take advantage of the workflow in the general ledger, but now we can build that information into our other systems and platforms and customize it for our business. So those APIs allow you to build your business around these software packages and build your process so that it's efficient and your data is where it needs to be. You don't need everyone in your firm, if you're a wealth management firm or family office or a business manager, going into the general ledger to find a cash balance. But if you can move that cash balance into the CRM where your client service personnel are working, they can see a snapshot of their client in one place in a familiar structure that they know, so that they're not in the general ledger, and vice versa. The general ledger folks can look at investment information without having to go into Addepar or their reporting or their data warehouse. So it allows you to work in the environment that you're used to, as well as an accountant environment. You're used to debits and credits, and an investment advisor is used to transactions and positions. And so you can look at those two different systems, but interface the data together.
I think the point on that's really important to make is we talk about APIs, and you hear that term a lot, and a lot of people are saying, well, does this have APIs? Does this system have APIs? Does it talk to one another? APIs in and of themselves are really not that interesting. It's how you leverage them and how you use them. Can you get data in and out is probably the first question, and then what data can you get in and out, and how can you build some granularity around that. So having the ability to get data in and out is important. Knowing what to do with that and building the workflow, the process, and the safeguards around that is probably even more important. And that's probably the one piece that a lot of the firms that are publishing their APIs really haven't established that. They've said, here's what you can do. How you do that and what you do with that is kind of up to you.
Tell me a little bit about the difference between pre-built integrations, pre-built APIs, and like an open API. What should be firms thinking about, and what are the differences between the two?
There's definitely value to firms that have already worked out some of those protocols and that process, where you've got two firms that have agreed on what we're going to do, how we're going to access that, what our security protocols are going to be, and then what we can do once we kind of make that handshake and start requesting data. But I think it's important to know that those firms have spent a significant amount of time negotiating that and figuring out what is it we're going to get, how are you going to send it to us, how frequently are we going to ask for it, and what are we going to do with it on our end. The other issue with APIs is when we talk about data, in many cases APIs are data. They're just the root, not the information, but the root data, the transactional volume, the pricing, whatever that might be. What that system is doing behind the scenes in the business logic may not be accessible through that API. So performance is a great example. There's a lot of firms that have an open API, but performance isn't included in that because performance is a cooked or processed transaction. And yes, you can pull all of the buys and sells, and you can pull all of the daily prices, but you're not going to get performance because there's something else going on behind the scenes there. It's usually pretty heavyweight. It takes a lot of processing. So to deliver that through an API is a challenge. So finding firms that have had that negotiation, made that handshake, and defined those rules and the structures makes it a little bit easier.
And sometimes there's a time where it doesn't fit. So an API is usually on-demand information. Well, sometimes you're pulling a lot of information. Well, I want to see all the balances of my GL for the last 10 years. That might not be the right way to look at that. There's also batches that can be, that to look at, batch pulling of information. Custodians are great at this. You might not want to hit the API constantly to the custodian because it's a lot of data. But what do you need? Well, at the end of the day, really all I need is my positions and transactions at the end of the market. And that's the information. And that's going to come through, you can use an API to pull that, but it's really going to come through as a batch process as opposed to on-demand information through an API.
Pre-built APIs, to your point, Rick, is that the two firms have worked it out. So it's plug and play, and there shouldn't be a big science experiment for the end client. So we think that that's an important component of it, to have that pre-built ecosystem to those key vendors in the marketplace. Obviously, within the family office space, you look at on the financial side, Agilink, and on the investment side, Adapar. But certainly, you take a look at an open API as a use as well, and we see that as more of enterprise firms that maybe have their own IT staff and development staff that need to do reporting that's above and beyond what any of those products do. They maybe need to extract data from multiple data sources, put it into a data warehouse, use Power BI. Those are firms that are willing to do some work and just using that raw data, much more of an enterprise level versus mid-market or small market where they're not going to have that capabilities. They really need a plug-and-play type of ecosystem to the vendors that they use. So both are important, both have a place, and I think it's important that when firms are evaluating a new vendor is to talk about not just are they in the cloud, but what is their API strategy, what is their eco strategy, and does that line up to the tech stack that they're using or going on in the future.